Hi, this is just a quick video to provide some information about how to complete the Reborn Legends scouting Google Sheet that's been sent to you, and you should be seeing something that looks like this on the link that you've been sent. I'll quickly just walk, I think it just makes sense, we'll just quickly walk through the actual instructions that are provided. There's a key here which we can go through, but the columns that are marked with blue, they're provided to you. You can't change them, they're set. The green ones are mandatory for you to complete. If you don't complete them, then we can't use then basically what you provided for that player that doesn't have them completed, we won't use it. The red ones are really important, and ideally you would complete them, but they're not mandatory. So ideally you would, but if you miss one or something like that, it's okay if you're not sure. The orange ones are secondary attributes, and you should complete most of them if you can. The yellow ones are tertiary, and ideally you would complete at least some of them, but again, you don't have to. So basically it's like green mandatory, red really important, orange quite important, yellow not so important, and then the black ones are entirely optional because they're hidden anyway. And then this specific column with the white, that's free for you to use whatever you want it for your own internal notes. We use it when we're doing it for notes about position to help with the mandatory position fields, and that'll be a bit more obvious when we look at that. There's a few specific columns that have a description of exactly what they mean in case you're not sure, and then there's basically some instructions. So you add the mandatory data, you then add the primary, tertiary, secondary and tertiary and hidden attribute data as you see fit. Those scores are all out of 20, their attribute scores out of 20. You have, for the positions, they're between 0 and 20 as opposed to the attributes, which are between 1 and 20. 0 means that they can't play the position at all, whereas 20 means they're fully proficient, and then it just scales in between. A player, you must put at least one of the positions as fully proficient, so you have to have at least one position that has 20 in it, and the total amount of position points across all positions can't exceed 100. When you're rating these players, it's a bit tricky because obviously a player plays for a whole career, and obviously as they different points in their career they can be completely different types of players. Some players quite extreme, but obviously the average player, they're better at the various points in their career. So the overarching rule here is that you're rating players based on their playing ability at the peak of their career. Now, the peak of a player's career varies from player to player, but typically speaking, if you're not quite sure, it's just, when they were sort of around 28 years old or so, typically. But there are exceptions to this. So you're basically just rating them as the player was when he was at the peak of his powers. And then there's an ability column, which is also needs to be between 1 and 20. There's a table below to help you sort of fill that out. Now this is just informative, to get a bit of a guide, and we can have a bit of a talk what that's used for. You need to fill it out, and it's kind of important, but not as important as what you would think. So like everything else, you're just doing it by your opinion, by the best of your ability, and if you get things a bit off, that's okay. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. It's just if you're not quite sure if there's a player, Paul Gascoigne, this is the one that we had to talk about because he was a little bit of an extreme player, for various reasons. We had a bit of a conversation. Should he be an 18? Should he be a 19? Should he be a 17? But actually he could have been any of those three. It wouldn't have mattered too much. The important thing is that he wasn't a 10 or something, that you get it in the ballpark. And the same is kind of true about a lot of the attributes. It's not that critical that you get it exactly right. You just want to sort of get it in the ballpark. So that's the instructions. They'll make a bit more sense when we go over. So now we're talking about the columns. So the green ones are what we provided to you. The blue ones are what we provided to you, and this is a set list of players that you rate. So there's some examples here to help you, and then these are the players that you can rate at the moment. Now we will add a lot more. We just want to sort of refine the process, and any issues or concerns that people have, or complexities or confusions or anything, we want to get those sorted out first before we start providing you with like lots and lots of players to rate, just in case we have to redo the whole template. There's various reasons why it makes sense just to have a pretty small list to begin with, just to make sure that everybody's happy with the process and that it works well. When you've completed adding the data for a player, you need to mark this column as a yes to let us know that you've finished. So that means you can be halfway through rating a player and not be quite sure. You can just leave it as no, and it doesn't matter that you filled it all out. We know not to pick it up from you. Once you mark it as yes, we know we can go and get the data that you provided. These are fixed, provided to you. So this is that score out of 20 for how good the player was, just overall. We can come back to that, what that means at the end exactly. This is just if they're left or right footed. If the player was either footed or both footed, or extremely good with both feet, you have to put them, this is their natural foot, they have to be left or right footed naturally in our systems. What you do is there's an attribute for weak foot. So if the player was like completely proficient with using both feet, then you would just set that as a 20, and then set their natural foot to be whatever it was, and then set the weak foot accordingly for how good they were with the other foot. And the position notes, you can put whatever you want here. What we do is we just put a position code, and then we can use that as reference to help us fill out this information. So all of these need to be numbers between 0 and 20. 20 means that the player is fully proficient in that position. 0 means they can't play it at all, and the number in between means something in between. It's important to know the sum of all of these. The sum can't exceed 200. Typically it won't happen unless you go pretty crazy with the positions, but it's just to be aware. Then all these attributes, now we're talking about the different colors. The red ones, these are kind of mandatory, really want you to complete these. The orange ones, ideally you would be completing them as well. The yellow ones, it's kind of optional. Ideally you do a few of them at least, but not all of them is really necessary. And the black ones are just completely at your discretion. And they're all out of 20, 1 to 20. And you just fill out the numbers. Now remember, this is as the player was at the peak of their powers, not how they should look as a youth. This is as the player was at the peak of their powers. So there's some examples here to help you sort of get a bit of an idea about what the sort of numbers could look like here. But again, it's your opinion, your numbers. You're allowed to vary from other people. That's fine. We'll have a system in place that, takes into account that some people will be rating at both extremes. And then at the end, this is again, this is provided, you can't change it. Essentially this column here, this is the data that we actually use for the player, and then this replicates the code that's in the game client for the Wikipedia link, so we can test if they work basically, and it allows you to link directly to the Wikipedia profile page from here if you want to check it out. Now we'll just quickly go through an example of a player. Now again, this is just my opinion, and obviously the more you know a player, the more accurate your opinion is. Now I've just plucked out one to do, which is Javier Saviola. So I'm just going to do that. Now typically what we would do, and you can do this your own way, however you want. But typically what we would do when we're rating a player, there's definitely a lot of players that we'd watched, a lot as children growing up, as adults going to matches, watching them. That's fine. You can just kind of do that because But players that you haven't seen play an awful lot, like Saviola, I've seen a fair bit throughout my life, but I wouldn't really purport to be some kind of expert in knowing everything about him. So typically, and that would be true for most players, nearly all players. So typically what I'd do is I'd just check out their Wikipedia profile. Sometimes it'll have useful bits, right? So he's known, it gives you some information, typically a bit of useful information. Now for players that have no video footage that you've never heard of, we basically never heard of but never seen play, don't really have any idea of, like, players from the past. Typically we have to go on written accounts, and Wikipedia is one place you can find written accounts of players for what they were good at, what they were bad at. So anyway, it says he was known for his speed, his dribbling, his abilities to score from almost any attacking position on the field. Now I know that for myself, based on watching play, that's not necessarily kind of true, because he's kind of known for scoring almost any, I don't know, I guess attacking. If you mean attacking from inside the penalty box or near the penalty box, sure, but I don't really remember him scoring pretty much any like long range goals. I'm sure he did score a few of his career, but he definitely wasn't known for long range strikes, in my opinion anyway. So anyway, there's a bit of information, and another thing that it can help you out with is knowing his height, because the jumping attribute is actually the jumping reach. So it's like a composite of how high they could jump as well as how tall they are. So a player who's 5'6", unless he's some kind of like of Olympic standard in jumping, he's going to have a pretty low jumping reach attribute no matter how good. And I don't think he was extraordinarily gifted at jumping either. I think he was just a bit above average, maybe, in my opinion. Again, now another thing you can do is we go onto YouTube. For a lot of players, especially attacking players, they tend to have lots and lots and lots of video footage, and you can just watch to your heart's content. Now, in preparation for this, I've actually watched about 20 minutes of YouTube footage of Saviola, both creating chances, scoring chances, and doing various other bits. So I'm kind of in a position that I feel like I'm okay to rate him. Now, again, it's when he was at the peak of his powers. Now, he's clearly a player that, like, when he was like 28, he was at his peak of his powers when he was younger, right? So he's a good example of this, of that. Most players that's around 28, but he was definitely a player where he reached his peak of his powers much younger than that. So we're going to rate him on the younger version of him, not of the older version. So the younger version is going to be a bit quicker. So here we are. So I don't know. I would say overall, my view is at the peak of his powers, he was probably a 17. Now, you could argue that I think he definitely wasn't an 18. You could possibly argue he was made, but I think 17 is pretty fair here. At the peak of his powers, he was a really, really handy player. Now, I'm going to double check this after, but I'm pretty sure I watched footage. A dead giveaway. I'm pretty sure he was right-footed. A dead giveaway of, if you're not sure, for players who are really, really good with both feet is, and I know that there's one or two exceptions to this rule in all of the history that I'm aware of football, but the foot that they take the penalties with or the free kicks with is typically their natural foot if they're really good with both. Now, I know there's a couple crazy examples of one particular player that took free kicks with one of his feet and penalties with the other foot because he felt that he had more power with one of his feet but more accuracy with the other one, and crazy stuff like that. But these are real, true exceptions, like one or two in the history of all of football. We don't have to worry too much about that. So if you're not sure, they're very good, very, very good with both feet, and you're not quite sure if you can find some footage of them taking a penalty, then that's a pretty dead giveaway as to what their natural foot is. Now, he was clearly a striker now, and he clearly never played any defensive positions or in midfield. Now, again, did he play? I'm pretty sure he pretty much exclusively played striker throughout his whole career, but I know that he played in various of these generic attacking player. I don't know what you want to call it, but like is Cristiano Ronaldo a left winger or a striker or a right winger? He's just kind of like plays everywhere, right? And to a minor degree, Saviola did a bit of that. So I don't know. I think you would say like he wasn't like extraordinary crosser. I think he would definitely want to be like a wrong-footed winger if he was going to be a winger. So I think for sure he would want to be. I think something like that is kind of a bit fair. He could have played wing okay, and probably could have played in a central attacking midfield. He was a bit creative as well. He had a bit of trickery about him, and he could dribble well. So I think he could have been probably a pretty handy. In fact, I would have rather had him as probably an attacking midfielder than a left winger, in my opinion. So again, it's just my opinion, and by all means, you could have just put zeros for these three because he pretty much was just a striker. That's fine. It's up to you. Now, he was quick, and I think acceleration-wise, I think he wasn't Olympic sprinter type quick. He wasn't one of the fastest players ever to have played the game, but he was quick, and he was super agile. So I think I would give him probably I mean, the fact that he had such a low center of gravity as well. I think he was super agile, had lots of balance. His anticipation was pretty good, but I'm comfortable just to leave that blank because, again, we're talking about it's a tricky one, this one, because we're rating him at the P. I don't know, but I'm not sure. That's the point. Just leave it. I'm not sure. He was pretty composed when it came to finishing, I would say. Very, very like above average. So he's quite a composed player. Maybe this could be a 19. Generally speaking, if you're not sure, it's better to state a bit too high if the attribute is high, and if the attribute is a low one, because you're not quite sure. For example, let's go say when he was doing his tackling, I don't really know. It's like he was, I don't know. Should it be a 6 or a 5 or a 4? I don't know. Just if you're not sure when it's low, go as low as possible, and if you're not sure when it's high, go as high as possible. So I'm like, I don't know if 18 or 19. Not quite sure. Okay, it's 19. Now, again, with the crossing, I think particularly he wasn't awful at crossing, but he definitely wasn't really good at it or known for it. I think, and again, some of these things are very objective, like the determination. Like if you give us a number that's less than 13 is the minimum for determination, so it'll get put up. Because if for us it's like, some players would have less than 13 determination, but it's pointless having a wiki player with less than 13 determination with how the users, like, there's an overemphasis placed on this attribute, so nobody would want the player if you had sort of less than about 13. So we tend to push it up to 13 even if somebody gives us less. I think in the case of Saville, he's a very determined player in his youth. I think you can argue that should be pretty high in my opinion. He made it straight to the top level quickly. Clearly he was pretty determined. He was really, really good. Again, I'm like 17, 18, 19, not quite sure. Maybe this should be a 19, but let's just leave that. Again, okay, let's push it up. That's what we said. Now, the endurance, I don't think he was known for. I think he did have a bit of a puff about him, but not too much work rate wise, in my opinion. This is all just my opinion. Finishing wise, he was a pretty clinical finisher. That should be very high. And his first touch was actually very, very good from what I saw. And he had quite a bit of flair about him, probably a bit more than that. He was, from everything that I saw, 20 minutes, not a single header. I didn't see nothing at all. Should be pretty low. I'm going to skip the black ones because we don't need them anyway. The jumping, again, he's 5'6". The guy can hardly, he should be very, very low. Something like that. I think that's probably pretty fair. Again, we said about the long shots. I don't remember seeing him scoring anything from long range. Again, in the 20 minutes of video that I watched. I'm going to skip the marking. It should be, okay, let's say it should be pretty low, I'm sure, here. Again, with the natural fitness, I'm not quite sure, but one thing, this has to do with the longevity of a player's career, largely. One thing that we do is we kind of check, how long did he actually play for? He played for 18 years, so he had a bit of longevity about him. I think you could say that his natural fitness was pretty high because he played for that type of length. Off the ball, he had excellent off-the-ball movement, and he was really quick. I don't know, I think they say he's quick, but really the quickness, I think, was in, from what I could see, it wasn't in his raw pace. It was more in his acceleration, and it was more in his agility and ability to change direction and stuff like that. So I think 18 is probably pretty fair for the pace. His passing actually seemed pretty decent from what I saw as well. And for a guy who's so small, he doesn't seem to be really weak. He could hold his own a bit. I think he gets a decent score for that. He doesn't seem to have particularly great teamwork at all from what I could see, and his technique was quite good, very good. Maybe not quite that good, but it was pretty good from what I could see, and I wouldn't say he was an extremely tenacious player, and his ability to pick an opening was pretty decent, and he was all right with it. He clearly had a preference, but he was all right. He could finish with both feet, but he clearly had a preference. And I'll just skip that one. So another thing he was, again, we'll just skip all these. We don't need them, right? So, and again, you don't have to fill out as much as I did. You can do much less. But, and I'm not saying this is just my quick view, some YouTube footage, some memories of the player. You can totally debate what I've done here. I have no doubt that you know, people who know him better will say that I'm wrong with some stuff here. Typically, though, we do this type of process. There's a few of us that do it, and we collect the results for the players. So that's basically what's happening. And then we can talk about, okay, so what happens with the blanks, right? So the blanks basically get filled by this number indirectly. So what this is kind of like the overall ability the player should have. So when the player is getting built, it'll largely use the data that's provided here to help sort of create the profile of the player. Now, it doesn't mean that the player is guaranteed to reach these numbers, and it also doesn't mean that the player is guaranteed to be limited to these numbers. It's just used as a guide when creating the player to kind of ensure that they will pop out to be a player that resembles something that looks like this. But in the case of the blanks, it needs to work out values for them, and essentially what it will do is it'll use this number to help drive that. So it's going to, as well as other attribute values. So for example, if I didn't fill out the agility, say, there's clearly a relationship between acceleration and balance and agility. There's relationships between attributes. There's clearly a relationship between first touch and, say, technique and various things. There's lots of relationships between these attributes. So between those relationships that exist and between this score and between the scores for everything else that it comes up with, the blanks will basically be filled with numbers that tie to the other attribute values as well as tie to overall how good we want the player. So this number is used actually more to determine the values for the attributes that aren't filled out. It doesn't really have anything to do much with the attributes that are filled out. So that's kind of it. And then we say, okay, we're happy, we're done. Now, you can fill this out. You can put any notes you want. It's like, this is for your own personal usage. So this is what we use it for typically. And then I say, right, I'm done. Saviola is good to go. And then I can do more of them. So that's basically how you fill out a player. These ones are just there for example purposes. You can't change them. They're just there to help, just to guide you. And again, you don't need to agree with the scores that are here. This is just one opinion of one person in our team that filled it out, what their opinion was for these attributes. So they're not these aren't the values necessarily that are even used for these players when they were created. They're just one person's view. A number of people's views were combined to come up with the scores that we use. This is just one view, and again, your view will just be one, and we're going to see how this works at a larger scale. At the moment, there's a few people on our team doing it, and now we're talking about really potentially opening this up, hopefully getting more accurate players rated as a result of that. So I think lastly, it just makes sense to thank you. Quickly go through the other tabs. This one you don't need. It's just there to validate this list against. If you're not, you don't need to know. I mean, this is filled out for you. If you're not sure, if you want to know what country IRL or ENG stands for, or, they're bad examples, you probably know, but I'm trying to think if there's any. Anyway, yeah, I think you probably know IND, because IND is India, but you might think it's Indonesia, which is, I believe Indonesia is IDN, and you can work that out by looking. So if you care, like IDN there, Indonesia and India. So fine, you don't need to worry about this one, and you can't change it anyway. It's just there to validate the nationalities list again, and then there's some terms and conditions, and you should read them. When you're providing the data for us, you're basically giving us permission to use the data that you've sent to us. As a result of providing the information, you're giving us the right to use it if you provide it to us. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions you can ask, and again, don't need to open up for debate. This is just my opinion about what their values could be for Saviola. You shouldn't be copying me, and you're totally entitled to have your own opinion, and we encourage you to have your own opinion. And if it's drastically different to mine, then by all means make it drastically different to mine. So thanks for your time. All you need to do is you'll get a personal link for your own spreadsheet that looks like this. You just fill them out, mark them as yes when you're done. Over time, we'll add more to the list, and we'll send out notifications when more are added to let people know. You don't need to tell us anything. We will periodically check everybody's sheet and pick up any new yeses that are marked to bring the data through. So thank you. And if you have any suggestions about how this could be made easier for you or how we can improve the process, right now it's like this is definitely not how we intend to do it long term. We definitely intend to have it more automated, and but we to collect the data and to make it easier for us. Right now there's going to be a manual work involved, but before we get to that stage, we want to make sure that the way that you provide the data for us, you're comfortable with it and that it works for you. We want to get it working for you first, and once we get it working for you and we get you happy, then we'll worry about getting us happy with how we can more effectively use the data that you provide us. So once again, thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing your opinion on these players. Cheers.